Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, you all are having a wonderful day today. So, anyways, I thought that I would review this little video by Dante's Back to the Nation because I found this very interesting. Anyways, Gervonta Tank Davis apparently may face this one fighter named Riley Romero. Riley Romero, I believe, is one of the contenders at 135 pounds. He's been in the news here and there on some of these YouTube channels, mainly because he's had some sparring sessions with some of the 135 pounders, like I believe Devin Haney and also Ryan Garcia. Personally, I've never really been overly impressed with Riley Romero. I don't think that he's really that great of a fighter, but it is what it is. Apparently, in the big news, Gervonta Tank Davis and Riley Romero, they may possibly face next. Apparently, that's what's been ordered by the WBA. But when it comes down to the overall, what I'm going to say is this. I just find it interesting overall, depending on which fighter it is, how the LDBC or new media, or how certain people they may treat this certain fighter compared to another one. As we know, when it comes to Canelo Alvarez, what does Dante say? Whatever fighter he pretty much faces, he pretty much says that Canelo Alvarez is facing the weakest link. We know that Canelo is facing Caleb Plant next, who in my opinion is one of the top fighters in the world, and probably, besides Canelo Alvarez, is the best fighter at 168 pounds. At least that's my opinion. Some people overall would say David Benavidez. I personally would say Caleb Plant. And of course, what Dante says about that fight is that Canelo Alvarez, of course, it's a for sure win. But you know, when Gervonta Tank Davis, when he's fighting this dude, who has fought no elite caliber fighters and really has not looked overly impressive in his career, you know, this is not a for sure win. You know, I just find that interesting. But anyways, let's see what Dante has to say about it. Let's tune in.
Dante's Boxing Nation, what's going on, guys? So Showtime Sports President Stephen Espinoza, he made it very clear that Gervonta Tank Davis won't be fighting against Keith Thurman. Stephen, he believes that...
Well, I could have told you that. Because Gervonta Tank Davis, he always calls out these big names, and then when it actually comes to actually fighting them, he's never actually serious about fighting them. That's the Gervonta Tank Davis way. But no, it's no offense against him, but a lot of the times he does sell a lot of wolf tickets. It is what it is.
Thurman is just too big, and the fight makes no sense. He said that Gervonta...
That's interesting, Dante. You should ask the question, why doesn't that make sense? Because before you were blabbering on about how that fight makes nothing but sense. And how Keith Thurman apparently wasn't the one that had confidence in himself. You see, he had no problem throwing Keith Thurman under the bus because of a fighter overall that he liked. You know, now a certain amount of people, they may ask overall, well, why do you think they're throwing Thurman under the bus? Because Thurman is what you would call a black fighter, or at least someone who's mixed when it comes down to it, and you say overall that they have a racial agenda. Well, they do have a racial agenda, but the thing is that Keith Thurman is not on their radar anymore because not only has he lost when it comes down to it, but on top of that, he pretty much has been replaced by Terrence Crawford and Errol Spence Jr. in that division. So it is what it is. Anyway.
Jay will definitely be fighting at 135 in his next fight. And Tank will be returning in December. Now, because he's fighting at 135, and because we keep hearing Rolly Romero say that he doesn't want to fight Devin Haney, he would rather fight Tank Davis. On top of that, Tank Davis is the regular WBA champion at 135. And because the WBA, they're getting rid of all of their interim belts, that means they're most likely going to order Gervonta Davis to defend his title against Rolly, who's the interim WBA champion. Now, in this fight, it makes all the sense in the world. And Rolly, he does a lot of trash talking. He's an undefeated fighter. He's a knockout puncher. I mean, he has a reputation at the Mayweather gym. And just the exchanges that he's had back and forth with Devin Haney.
That's interesting. Once again, if you've seen Riley Romero fight when it comes down to it, you would know overall that Riley Romero, he's really not that elite of a fighter. But what is Dante trying to say? Oh, Riley Romero, you know, he has quite a reputation. Why is he saying that? Because he's trying to build up Gervonta Tank Davis' platform. But once again, if this were a Canelo Alvarez doing this, or if this were a Vasyl Lomachenko doing this, what do you think he'd say?
At least when there were talks that they were going to fight against each other, that alone gave Rolly a lot more attention. Now, I've already told you guys that when it came to Rolly doing all the talking and deciding not to fight against Devin Haney, I told you the only way he could justify not taking the Devin Haney fight after all of the stuff that he said on the internet, the only way he could justify it is if he fights against Tank Davis.
Well, I sort of agree with you there, Dante. Here's also my problem. How come Gervonta Tank Davis doesn't have to justify not facing Keith Thurman, or not facing Josh Taylor, or not facing one of the elite 135 pounders? Because we all know Tank Davis was allegedly so serious about facing these big names, and now all of a sudden, when it came to light that he possibly could face them, all of a sudden he doesn't want to face them anymore. I just find that interesting how Tank gets no criticism from Dante or any of these other LDBC channels for doing that. But, it is what it is.
Which is, once again, why he's been telling people he's not going to fight Devin next, because he wants to fight Tank Davis. But the only problem is, Rolly, he's never told the public whenever he does an interview, he's never said we're in negotiations. We're talking about the fight right now. My people are talking with his people. He's never said any of these things about that. So hopefully, if Tank does choose Rolly accepts the fight and he doesn't pull a Ryan Garcia and have an anxiety attack. I just have a strong feeling that Mayweather and Tank Davis, they're really looking at possibly three opponents right now. And that is Jojo Diaz, who you guys probably don't know. Jojo, he just officially rejected and turned down the Devin Haney fight, which, by the way, the Zone was pushing for that fight. So not only was Devin Haney pushing for it, but the Zone was pushing for it.
What I'll say is this: if Jojo Diaz goes on to face Ryan Garcia next, I don't necessarily have a problem with that, because Ryan Garcia, once again, he's very, very popular. He's not someone overall that I find to be as elite as Devin Haney, but he is very popular. Like I said, he has a big following, especially on Instagram when it comes down to it. He has that pretty boy image when it comes down to it. So, they're kind of trying to build him up to be like a mini Oscar De La Hoya, almost, when it comes down to it. So, we'll see what happens with that. But like I said, I wouldn't necessarily mind that fight. And on top of that, both of them are Mexican-American. So, that probably would actually be a very decent fight.
And the reason why they were...
But there's really no reason for Gervonta Tank Davis to face Riley Romero if he's serious about facing elite opponents. Riley Romero is not an elite opponent.
Pushing for it so hard is because Ryan Garcia, he didn't want the Jojo Diaz fight. So now that Jojo Diaz, he pulls out of a title fight, I can see Gervonta Tank Davis and his team going after either Jojo Diaz, Rolly Romero, or even Oscar Valdez. I tell you guys all...
Oscar Valdez would be an interesting fight. That'd be the best fight out of all of them, because Oscar Valdez at least is an A-grade fighter. I think Gervonta is probably a little bit too big for him, but it still would be a very interesting fight.
Time Ray sales, and that's the reason why those fights will be so big. So hopefully, we see Tank in the ring with one of those guys, or even a fourth guy, Mikey Garcia. Now that...
Well, he's not going to face him, and Mikey's not going to be interested in that fight either. Because Mikey's not interested in facing any of these A-class fighters either. Just like Gervonta ain't interested in fighting a lot of these A-class fighters, Mikey isn't serious about facing a lot of these A-class fighters. Mikey's looking for that payday. That's what he's looking for. He's looking for that Manny Pacquiao payday so he can ride off into the sunset because he don't want to box anymore.
Would be even bigger. So hopefully he can get one of these guys in the ring. But I'm sure whoever he picks is going to be an opponent worth watching him fight. Another fighter that they did mention as well is...
That's interesting. So Jojo Diaz, Jojo Diaz and Riley Romero, apparently those are fighters overall that are worth watching him fight. But once again, when Canelo Alvarez, when he faces Caleb Plant, who's an official champion, not one of these bullshit champions like an interim champion or a regular champion, an official champion when it comes down to it, and one of the top dogs there, what is Canelo doing? He's facing one of the weakest links, allegedly. That's what he says. Once again, it depends on what fighter it is. I just find it very interesting between the narrative about Gervonta Tank Davis and some of the other fighters that Dante and the LDBC may not like.
Possible option is Gary Russell Jr. Let's see what happens. But he's definitely fighting in December. That's all I got for now, guys. On to the next one.
That's really about it for me too. But I just thought that was going to be very interesting. Anyways, thank you all so much for watching. We'll see what happens. I'll talk to you all later.